Welcome to our channel, $1 Million Made Easy. On this channel, we run numbers for people. We create spreadsheets and just look ahead what you might have in the future. What we do is use the actual historical returns for the S&P 500 for the last 100 years, which includes the depression years, because I want to give you worst case scenarios, because if you can survive with the worst case scenarios, then you can do just fine in better decades. We project ahead of what similar returns might do for you in the future. They won't be identical. The resulting numbers are simply a possible range of what may happen. They will be ballpark figures, not exact. I'm not a financial advisor. I'm just a numbers guy who loves to run numbers for people. In this case, in this video, we're going to be looking at somebody in the withdrawal stage. Let's say, for example, you have $500,000. I know lots of times people think they're a failure if they don't have $1 million, but let's just run the numbers of 500,000. Let's say you think you need $4,500 a month for living expenses, which would be $54,000 a year. You want to give yourself a 3% COLA, and you want to do a 50-50 asset allocation. Now, before we do anything more, we need to realize this is way too high of a withdrawal rate, but we haven't taken into account Social Security. What if you take into account Social Security from the very first year? Again, we can change this to the second, fifth, seventh year or whatever when Social Security kicks in, but we're going to do it from the very beginning because that shows us we decrease that 10% withdrawal rate down to a 6.22% withdrawal rate because you only need $2,593 coming out of your nest egg instead of $4,500 because of this Social Security. So hopefully that makes sense. So we're going to go ahead and run the numbers and do this for every single year for the last 100 years to see how the numbers would have worked out, to see how many times you would have run out of money percentage-wise. This shows us that 31% of the time in the last 100 years using those numbers, with this withdrawal percentage, you would have run out of money. 69% of the time you would have succeeded, but here's the actual graph. During the Depression years, 1937, along the late 60s and early 70s, and also the year 2000, what's going on? These are the decades that were down decades. We had obviously the Depression years, everybody knows about those. 1970s had some down years, down 14, down 26, down 7, and then more recently, 4 down years in the 2000s, including 2008. So that really affected the numbers to the point where you'd actually would run out of money given these numbers with this kind of percentage withdrawal rate and a 50-50 asset allocation. So 31% of the time, remember, this is after 20 years. We could also look at the 30-year graph, which right here you can see that's even worse. 54% of the time you're running out of money. So that would be changing to 54% right here. So you're kind of in bad shape with the 50-50. Do you think the 60-40 would help any, or would it make it worse? In other words, 21% of the time you'd be running out of money, not 31%. Isn't that a huge difference? Look at the graph now, folks. Kind of got, you're still a few around the years, late 60s. You still got the Depression years. You still got the 2000s. Let's take it one step further. What about a 70-30 asset allocation? 70% staying in the S&P 500, so it can take advantage of these up years. 30% going over in the cash reserve, so it can absorb these amounts when the market's going down. Let's see how those numbers work. Why don't you look at the difference? 15% of the time, you would have had a problem in the last 100 years. The graph's looking a lot better. Just going from a 50-50 split through the 60-40 split and down to a 70-30 split. This number here is the amount, that percentage going in the cash reserve account. It's actually improving. If I ran it at 80-20, this would show a 14% failure rate. Yes, you still have a failure rate, but you're having an 85% success rate. But what's the problem here? What's the real problem? We're going to see if you have a lower percentage withdrawal rate, your asset allocation isn't near as important. But hopefully you see this kind of withdrawal rate, 6.22 instead of the recommended 4% by most people. That's when you start having problems and you really got to play with your asset allocation. Remember, 50-50 was a 31% failure rate. 60-40 was a 21% failure rate. And a 70-30 was a 15% failure rate. What's going on here? Again, you're putting money over here in a bucket, but if you're only getting like 3% in that bucket and you're still taking out 6.22% to live on, you're losing money both when the market's going down because the value is going down there, but you're losing money in your cash reserve account because you're taking out more than it's getting in interest or in dividends or whatever in returns. So that's why you have such a problem. What happens? Watch the big significance if we go to $4,000 a month, which is a 5% withdrawal rate. You wouldn't think it'd make that much of a difference going from 6.22 to 5.02 withdrawal percentage, but watch the difference here. We're going to go ahead and redo these numbers with the 50-50 split. Now we have just a 6% failure rate. But my whole point is that's obvious. If you take out less, you're going to have more. But I want you to notice the asset allocation isn't near as important when you can keep it closer to the 4% rule. Watch what happens if I go to a 70-30 split. Went from a 6% failure rate to a 4% failure rate. What made the difference? Why did going from 50-50 to 70-30 make such a huge difference before? Because your withdrawal rate was too high at 6.22%. Remember what it was at 50-50? It was a 31% failure rate. At 60-40, it was a 21% failure rate. And at 70-30, it was a 15% failure rate. But here, with only a 5.02% withdrawal rate, the 50-50 was 6% and the 70-30 was 4% failure rate. Your money is going to last. Why? Because you're keeping closer to the 4% rule. And when you do that, your asset allocation isn't near as important. You start going to a higher percentage withdrawal rate, then your asset allocation becomes really problematic. In fact, you're better off leaving more money in the S&P 500 than putting it over in a cash reserve account. From a 31% failure rate to a 15% failure rate, just that difference going between 4,500 down to 4,000 can make that big of a difference. Hopefully this made sense to you, but always remember to take into account Social Security because that makes a huge difference. Because if you don't have that, that makes this withdrawal rate. What did we see at 4,500? Like 10%, I think it was. Yeah, 10.80. So you were definitely going to be running out of money. But that's what we do on this channel. We run numbers for people to help them kind of see the importance of, in this case, sticking close to the 4% withdrawal rule, but also how important your asset allocation is, but how dependent that asset allocation is on what your withdrawal percentage is. In order to run numbers for you, just give me your beginning balance, your monthly withdrawal, your Social Security amount, and the year to start. We started in the first year here. We could do it any subsequent year after that, the third year, fifth year, whatever. And if you get a pension, the same information. But please consider subscribing to this channel. Let people know there's a channel out there that'll run numbers for them and do all kinds of scenarios. We create all kinds of spreadsheets to help people understand what their future might look like. Please like these videos, and thanks so much for watching.